The Montana wilderness erupted in a flash of otherworldly fire as the ship tore through the atmosphere. Nathan Foster stood transfixed at the fire tower's observation deck, his experienced eyes tracking the unusual trajectory of what definitely wasn't a meteor. 15 years of fighting wildfires had taught him the behavior of natural phenomena. This was something else entirely. The object carved a blazing path through the evening sky, leaving a trail of iridescent flames that shifted between crimson and violet. When it finally impacted in the dense forest below, the resulting explosion sent a shockwave that rattled the tower's windows. Nathan grabbed his gear without hesitation. Whatever had just crashed was going to start a forest fire if he didn't act fast. He radioed in the coordinates but decided against waiting for backup. The unusual color of the flames concerned him. If this was some sort of experimental aircraft, there might be survivors who needed immediate help. The 4-mile hike to the crash site took him just under an hour, his pace urgent but measured. The crash site defied explanation. Instead of the expected inferno, he found a perfectly circular clearing of crystallized earth, as if the ground itself had been flash-frozen in mid-explosion. At the center sat what could only be described as a ship, its organic-looking hull gleaming like polished obsidian. The vessel was surprisingly intact, though strange symbols along its surface pulsed with dying light. "Hello?" Nathan called out, approaching cautiously. "Anyone alive in there?" A section of the hull suddenly liquefied, and a figure emerged, tall, humanoid, but definitely not human. Her skin had a faint luminescence, like embers beneath ash, and her hair moved like living flame. She carried something wrapped in a shimmering material close to her chest. What struck Nathan most were her eyes. They blazed like captured supernovas, filled with equal parts fear and fierce determination. She spoke, her voice carrying an ethereal resonance that seemed to bypass his ears and vibrate directly in his mind. "Stay back, Earth Dweller. I mean you no harm, but I will defend myself and my child if necessary." Nathan slowly raised his hands, showing they were empty. "I'm here to help. My name is Nathan Foster. I'm a firefighter. I protect people and the forest from fires. Are you hurt?" The alien woman wavered slightly, exhaustion evident in her stance. The bundle in her arms moved, and a soft cooing sound emerged. Her expression softened fractionally. "I am Ember Solaris, Royal Guard of the Piran Flame Court. My daughter and I." She stumbled, her glow dimming. "We seek sanctuary." Nathan moved forward instinctively as she swayed, barely catching her as she collapsed. Her skin was hot to the touch, but not burning, more like the lingering warmth of sun-baked stones. The baby in her arms began to cry, the sound heartbreakingly similar to a human infant's. As he held them, the ship behind him began to disintegrate, breaking down into particles that scattered on the wind like glowing ash. Nathan realized he had just become involved in something far beyond his experience as a wilderness firefighter. Looking down at the unconscious alien woman and her child, he made a decision that would alter not only his life but the fate of 2 worlds. "You're safe now," he whispered, though he knew she couldn't hear him. "I'll protect you both." He couldn't take them to a hospital or call in the authorities, that much was obvious. Instead, he headed for his cabin, a remote property inherited from his grandfather that wasn't on any official maps. As he carried them through the darkening forest, the infant's cries gradually settled into soft whimpers, tiny fingers that seemed to glow from within clutching at his shirt. The stars emerged above the towering pines, and Nathan couldn't help but wonder which one Ember had fled from, and what terrible circumstances had driven her to cross the vast distance between them with nothing but her child and desperation. He had a feeling he would find out soon enough, and that his life of relative solitude was about to become far more complicated. Behind them, the crystallized clearing slowly began to crack and fade, erasing evidence of the extraordinary arrival. But nothing could erase the fact that Earth had just received its first refugees from among the stars, a warrior mother with fire in her veins, and a child who might be carrying something that would change everything. Nathan's remote cabin had never felt so alive. The usual silence of his wilderness refuge was now filled with the soft humming of Ember Solaris as she cradled her daughter, Aurora, by the fireplace. After 3 days of recovery, the Piran warrior's natural glow had strengthened, though Nathan noticed it dimmed whenever she gazed at the night sky through the windows. "Your world's fire is different," Ember observed, extending her hand toward the flames. The fireplace's orange tongues leaned toward her like flowers tracking the sun. Less conscious. But pure, in its way. Nathan watched from his worn leather armchair, still amazed by how quickly he'd adjusted to sharing his home with 2 aliens. "You mean fire is alive on your world? Everything burns on Pyrrha." A shadow crossed her luminescent features. "Or it did, before the Extinction faction gained power. They believe our connection to the flame makes us weak, that we should evolve beyond it." Her arms tightened around Aurora, whose small form emitted a soft, pulsing radiance. "My daughter carries a genetic variant that strengthens our bond with fire instead of diminishing it. The faction would either destroy her or use her for their experiments." Before Nathan could respond, his security system chimed. The remote cameras he'd installed after retiring from hotshot firefighting had detected movement on the access road. Ember immediately stood, her hair igniting into actual flames. "They've found us." Nathan checked the feed and felt his heart skip. 3 black SUVs were approaching, led by a familiar vehicle. Worse. It's Director Richard Kane from the Forest Service. My former boss. He ran a hand through his hair. He never makes personal visits unless something's big. Government officials? Ember's voice carried an edge of panic. On my world, they were the first to align with the Extinction faction. Kane's not like that. He's a good man. Nathan paused. But we can't risk it. There's a hidden cellar under the kitchen. It's lined with old lead pipes, might help mask any energy readings they're tracking. Ember hesitated, then pressed her forehead to his in an startlingly intimate gesture. Heat radiated between them. If they discover us, run with Aurora. She matters more than either of us. The gravity of her trust hit Nathan like a physical force. Here was a being who could probably reduce him to ash with a thought, and trusting him, a simple human firefighter, with her child's safety. Nothing's going to happen to any of us, he promised. Minutes later, Nathan opened his front door to greet Kane and his entourage. His old boss looked exactly as he remembered, tall, weathered, with kind eyes that missed nothing. Quite a light show in your sector 3 nights ago, Kane said without preamble. Satellite imagery caught something interesting before the clouds conveniently rolled in. Just lightning hitting an old-growth tree, Nathan replied smoothly. I checked it out, nothing to report. Kane's expression remained neutral. Funny thing about lightning, it doesn't usually leave crystallized Earth formations. Or traces of element signatures that don't exist on Earth. Nathan's mind raced. In the cellar below, Ember would be able to hear every word. One wrong move could start an interplanetary incident. Richard, you know me. If I saw anything unusual, anything that could be a threat to the forest or people, I'd report it. Would you? Kane stepped closer, lowering his voice. Because the Nathan Foster I know would protect something vulnerable, even if it meant breaking every rule in the book. He glanced meaningfully at the cabin. We detected the energy spike from orbit. Others will have too. Less friendly parties are already en route. A high-pitched tone suddenly filled the air, making everyone wince. The SUV's electronics sparked and died. Nathan felt the hair on his arms stand up, the same sensation he'd experienced when Ember's ship self-destructed. Kane's radio crackled. Sir. Multiple bogies just breached the atmosphere. They're heading straight for us. The sky above the cabin exploded into crimson light as 3 ships, similar to Ember's but larger and bristling with weaponry, decelerated through the cloud layer. Their hulls gleamed like wet blood in the setting sun. "Hunters," Ember's voice rang out. She stood in the doorway, Aurora secured in a sling across her chest, her entire form blazing with internal fire. "The Extinction Faction's elite kill squad." Nathan moved to stand beside her, aware of Kane's men drawing weapons. "Still think we can handle this quietly?" Kane stared at Ember for a long moment, then shocked everyone by laughing. "An alien firefighter. God, I love this job." He turned to his team. "Stand down. Let's show our guests how Earth handles unwelcome visitors." The hunters' ships opened fire, and Nathan found himself caught between two species' definitions of diplomacy. As Ember launched streams of living fire skyward and Kane's men deployed what looked suspiciously unlike standard Forest Service equipment, he realized his quiet life of fighting natural fires had just gone supernatural. In the midst of the chaos, he felt tiny Aurora grasp his finger, her touch warm with trust and possibility. Whatever happened next, their fates were now bound together in flames. The Montana forest erupted in a spectacular display of supernatural combat. Ember's flames, now strengthened by her trust in her Earth allies, twisted into fantastic shapes that corralled and contained the Extinction Faction's energy weapons. Director Kane's Forest Rangers proved to be members of a classified xenological defense unit, their equipment specifically designed to counter extraterrestrial threats. Nathan found himself at the heart of it all, his years of firefighting experience giving him unique insight into controlling and directing Ember's powers. "The fire follows the wind patterns," he shouted, using hand signals familiar from his hotshot days. "Channel it through the natural drafts." Ember's eyes blazed with understanding. Her flames coalesced into a massive firestorm that rode the evening thermals, engulfing one of the hunter ships in a cocoon of supernatural fire. The vessel's hull, designed to withstand the heat of atmospheric entry, began to bubble and warp. "Remarkable," Kane muttered, watching through tactical goggles. "She's not just generating fire, she's controlling its fundamental properties." He keyed his radio. "All units, coordinate with the alien fire patterns. Standard Containment Protocol Omega." As his team executed the order with practiced precision, Nathan noticed something extraordinary. Where Ember's flames met the specialized containment fields Kane's people were generating, the energies didn't clash, they synchronized, creating a defensive matrix more powerful than either technology alone. "The compatibility is impossible," one of the hunters snarled in that same mind-touching speech Ember used. Their leader, a tall figure in crystalline armor, had emerged from the second ship. "Human science is primitive. They are barely beyond burning wood for warmth." "You understand nothing of warmth," Ember replied, Aurora secured safely in a carrier on Nathan's back. The baby's glow pulsed in time with her mother's flames. "These humans know fire as we once did, before your faction tried to strip it from our souls. They respect it, work with it, understand its true nature." The hunter commander laughed, the sound like crackling glass. "And what would a primitive human understand of our sacred flame?" "Fire isn't about destruction," Nathan spoke up, years of forestry wisdom flowing naturally. "It's about renewal. The most devastating wildfires make way for new growth. The hottest flames forge the strongest bonds." He looked at Ember as he said this, and something unspoken passed between them. Bonds? The commander's armor began to shift, revealing weapons grafted into their body. "Like the bond your corrupt genetics create with flame, young princess? The one you passed to your abomination of a child?" They raised their arm, which had transformed into a cannon-like apparatus. "Our scientists are quite eager to study both of your corpses." Everything happened at once. The commander fired, their weapon releasing a beam of energy that negated fire itself, creating a dead zone in the air. Kane's team launched a barrage of containment fields. Nathan, acting on instinct, threw himself forward, placing his body between the beam and Ember. But Ember had other plans. With a cry that shook the mountains, she wrapped Nathan and Aurora in a cocoon of protective flame and met the hunter's beam head-on. Where the energies collided, reality itself seemed to bend. Impossible. The commander staggered back. Your flames should be extinguished. Our weapons are based on the same misunderstanding as your ideology, Ember announced, her voice carrying the authority of her royal heritage. Fire isn't meant to be controlled or negated. It's meant to be in balance. She glanced at Nathan, who nodded in understanding. Together, they began to move in perfect synchronization. Nathan used his firefighter's knowledge of wind patterns and fuel management, while Ember channeled her flames through the natural paths he created. Kane's team, catching on quickly, adjusted their containment fields to amplify the effect. The result was beautiful and terrible to behold. A symphony of fire and science, human intuition and alien power, all directed at the hunters who had underestimated what two species could achieve together. But in the midst of their apparent victory, Aurora suddenly began to cry. Her glow, usually a soft pulse, flared blindingly bright. The child's genetic gift was manifesting far earlier than anyone had expected, and with it came a revelation that would change everything. Where Aurora's power touched the hunter's weapons, both energies transformed into something entirely new. The baby wasn't just resistant to the Extinction Faction's technology, she was the key to evolving it into something greater. So that's why they really want her, Nathan realized, holding the crying child close as Ember defended them. She's not just preserving your connection to fire. Ember nodded grimly, her flames pushing back another hunter assault. She's the bridge between the old ways and the new. Proof that evolution doesn't mean abandoning our nature, but transcending it. She met Nathan's eyes. Just as she's now a bridge between our worlds. The battle hung in precarious balance, but the hunters were regrouping for another attack. As the sun set behind the mountains, casting the battlefield in deepening shadows, Nathan and Ember stood side by side, their newfound understanding about to be tested by the full might of the Extinction Faction. And somewhere in the gathering darkness, other ships were approaching, whether friend or foe remained to be seen. The approaching ships pierced through the clouds like falling stars, their designs a perfect fusion of organic curves and crystalline edges. Nathan recognized the similarities to both Ember's vessel and the hunter's craft. These were Piran ships, but unlike any they'd seen before. The flame court, Ember breathed, her voice mixing wonder and dread. My people's highest council. But how did they? I'm afraid that's my doing, Director Kane admitted, lowering his tactical goggles. The moment we detected the crash, we activated a quantum beacon. Insurance, in case we weren't the only ones watching Earth's skies. He met Ember's blazing gaze. We've been preparing for first contact for decades. Better to face it on our terms. The hunter commander laughed, the sound like shattering glass. Perfect. Now the entire court can witness the extinction of the old ways. They raised their weapons. Starting with the mongrel child who dares to twist our evolution. Aurora, still secured to Nathan's back, began to pulse with increasing intensity. Each wave of energy seemed to ripple through reality itself, causing both human technology and Piran flames to fluctuate wildly. The baby wasn't just crying anymore, she was singing, a haunting melody that seemed to resonate with the fundamental forces of the universe. Her gift, Ember gasped, realization dawning. It's not just about fire. She doesn't just bridge the old ways and the new, she bridges everything. Matter, energy, spaces between spaces. The flame court ships landed in a perfect circle around the battlefield, their hulls shifting like liquid metal. From each vessel emerged figures that seemed to be made of living flame contained within crystalline shells, a perfect balance of the elements the Extinction Faction sought to separate. Ember Solaris, a voice rang out, carrying the weight of eons. The speaker, a being of pure white flame, stepped forward. You have brought us to a primitive world, risked exposure of our greatest secret, all for the sake of a child who defies the natural order. Nathan moved to stand beside Ember, his firefighter's gear looking absurdly mundane among the assembled alien royalty. There's nothing unnatural about her. I've spent my life studying fire's role in nature. Sometimes the most important growth only comes after everything burns away. The white flame being tilted their head. You speak with wisdom, human. But you cannot understand the complexities of our society, the delicate balance we. They were interrupted by a massive explosion. The hunter commander, seeing their chance slipping away, had activated some kind of doomsday protocol. Their ship erupted into a chain reaction of anti-fire energy, creating a rapidly expanding dead zone that began to consume everything it touched. The fools, one of the court members cried. They've initiated the void cascade. It will consume all fire, all energy, until nothing remains. Nathan watched in horror as the dead zone approached. Where it touched, all energy simply ceased to exist, not just fire, but heat, light, even the basic atomic motion that held matter together. It was entropy incarnate, the ultimate weapon of those who feared the transformative power of fire. But Aurora was still singing. Her melody grew stronger, and Nathan felt Ember's hand grasp his. Where their fingers intertwined, energy sparked and danced. He understood suddenly, with a clarity that transcended words. She's not just a bridge, he said urgently to the court. She's proof that different forms of fire, different forms of life, can do more than coexist. They can create something entirely new. Ember nodded, her flames beginning to harmonize with Aurora's song. The extinction faction fears change because they see it as loss. But true evolution isn't about losing what we are. She looked at Nathan, her eyes burning with more than just fire. It's about becoming more than we ever dreamed possible. The dead zone was seconds away from reaching them. Nathan felt Ember's power flow through him, guided by his lifetime of understanding fire's natural patterns. Aurora's song reached a crescendo, and in that moment, everything changed. Where the dead zone touched them, it didn't extinguish their flames, it transformed them. Nathan's human intuition, Ember's Pyrrhan power, and Aurora's bridge-building gift combined into something unprecedented. Fire that didn't burn, energy that didn't consume, a perfect fusion of preservation and progress. The hunter commander stared in disbelief as their ultimate weapon was transformed into a wave of creation rather than destruction. Where the transformed energy touched their forces, weapons became art, armor melted into robes, and the hard edges of their evolution softened into something more balanced. But the price was steep. Supporting this transformation was draining Ember's strength at an alarming rate. Nathan could feel her flames flickering, dying. "Don't you dare," he whispered, holding her tighter. "We haven't come this far to lose you now." The Flame Court moved as one, adding their power to the effort. Director Kane's team deployed their containment fields at full strength, creating channels for the energy to flow. Yet still it wasn't enough, the transformation was too massive, the power required too great. As Ember's flames began to fade, Nathan made a decision that would alter both their worlds forever. After all, what was a firefighter's duty if not to step into the flames when others needed saving? Nathan stepped into the maelstrom of energy, letting Aurora's song guide him. Years of fighting wildfires had taught him that sometimes the only way to save everything was to become part of the flame itself. As Ember's power faltered, he opened himself fully to the fire that had always called to him. "Nathan, no." Ember's voice cracked with emotion. "Your human form can't channel this much power. It will consume you." But Nathan smiled, remembering every forest he'd saved, every flame he'd guided, every moment that had led him to this impossible junction between two worlds. "You said it yourself, fire isn't about destruction. It's about transformation." The energy surged through him, and instead of fighting it, he welcomed it. His consciousness expanded, touching every flame, every spark, every heartbeat of warmth on Earth and beyond. He felt Ember's essence intertwining with his own, their shared understanding of fire's true nature creating something unprecedented. Aurora's song reached impossible heights, her genetic gift allowing her to weave her parents' sacrificial power into a new form of existence. Where Nathan's humanity met Ember's Pyrrhan nature, guided by their child's bridge-building abilities, a miracle occurred. The dead zone wasn't just stopped, it was reborn. The Extinction faction's ultimate weapon of entropy became a catalyst for creation. Nathan felt his physical form dissolve, but instead of ending, he became something more. His consciousness merged with the flames themselves, becoming a being of pure energy like the flame court, but with his human understanding intact. Impossible, the Hunter commander whispered, watching their weapons transform into works of art, their ships blooming into gardens of crystal and fire. The human, he's becoming. What we all could become, Ember finished, her own form shifting to match Nathan's new state. Where their energies touched, new forms of matter sparkled into existence. Not bound by the old or consumed by the new, but a perfect synthesis of both. The flame court moved forward as one, their crystalline forms resonating with the change. The white flame being spoke, their voice filled with awe. In all our centuries of evolution, we never imagined, we thought progress meant leaving our nature behind. But this child, and these humans. They gestured to Kane's team, who stood witnessing the transformation with expressions of wonder. They've shown us that true evolution means embracing all that we are, while becoming more than we were. Aurora laughed, a sound of pure joy that sent ripples of creative energy across both worlds. In her, the future of both species was secured, not through domination or extinction, but through harmony and growth. Nathan, now a being of conscious flame himself, reached for Ember. Their energies danced together, creating patterns of impossible beauty. I always wondered why I was drawn to fire, he mused, his thoughts touching everyone present. Now I understand. It wasn't about controlling it or fighting it. It was about becoming one with it. The Hunter forces, transformed by Aurora's gift and witness to the power of unity, laid down their weapons. The Flame Court declared an end to the Civil War, with Aurora recognized as the living proof that evolution and tradition could coexist and strengthen each other. Director Kane, ever practical, stepped forward. Well, I'd say this qualifies as a successful first contact. He looked up at the newly transformed beings that had once been Nathan and Ember. I don't suppose you'd be interested in helping establish formal diplomatic relations? We could use firefighters who understand both worlds. Nathan's flame form flickered with laughter. I think we can arrange something. After all, Earth's forests still need protecting. He turned to Ember, their energies swirling together. And we have a daughter to raise, one who will inherit two worlds made stronger by their differences. Ember's flame embraced his. Two worlds, she agreed, and infinite possibilities. Above them, the Montana sky blazed with aurora-like curtains of fire, a new constellation taking shape, an eternal reminder of the night humanity learned that the greatest evolution comes not from extinguishing our natural fires, but from learning to burn brighter together. Aurora, cradled in a cradle of her parents' merged energy, reached up toward the stars with hands that glowed with the light of new dawn. In her eyes, human determination met Pyrrhan fire, creating a spark that would light the way forward for generations to come. The forest around them, rather than being destroyed by the cosmic battle, had been transformed. New species of plants emerged, bearing flowers that bloomed with living flame. The very air hummed with the possibility of what could be achieved when different worlds dared to mix their fires and forge something new from the flames of change. And somewhere in the endless dance of energy and matter, a former firefighter and a flame princess had finally found their true forms, protecting both their worlds while nurturing the future that burned bright in their daughter's eyes. The end.